Okay, good evening, everyone. We are going to look at Parsha Shemos. Now, I think when you begin another sefer of the Torah, what I think is really, really important is to get a sense of the sefer, as a whole. You need to get a sense of the sefer as a whole, and in order to do that, I think we need to consider the essence of this sefer by looking at the Ramban. The Ramban has a Hakdama, has an introduction to Sefer Shemos, and he says as follows. If you're following across the list, it's right at the very beginning. The first words he says on the sefer: "Hayishlem Akosov Sefer Bereshis." The Torah has completed Sefer Bereshis. Shu Sefer Hayitzira b'chidush ha'olam yitziras kol notzar. The essence of Bereshis is the formation. It's the formation of the world, and it's the formation of us as a people. The notion of Yitzira. Over Mikre ha'avos, and in Mikre, the Mikre avos shem ke'inin Yitzira lezaron. And also in everything that took place with regards to the avos, our ancestors, the avos HaKadoshim, which is a sense of Yitzira lezaron. It's a formation for their descendants. Everything that transpired with regards to the avos and the imahos, tziyurei devarim lirmoizu lahudia kol osid lavei bohem. It is designed. It demonstrates everything that would take place with regards to their descendants as well. After it began, the Torah has completed the description of the Yitzira, the formation. Hischil Sefer Acher begins another Sefer with regards to the action. The formation leads to the action. Everything that comes from those beginnings, from those hints, from those seeds that are sown there. And then he describes how Sefer Shemos deals with the first God, of course, the first exile, and the Geula, and the redemption. And he says this is why the Torah goes back and begins with the names of those who went down to Mitzrayim, even though that's, of course, written at the end of Sefer Bereshis. Because the idea is that the Golus itself begins with their descent into Mitzrayim. Continues the Ramban. He says the Golus, that exile, is not complete until they return to the place they were before. When they came out of Mitzrayim, even though they came out of the house of slavery in a physical sense, they were still considered to be as if they were in exile. They were in a land that was not theirs, and they were confused, wandering in the desert. When they came to Har Sinai, also Mishkan, they made the Mishkan. V'shava Kodesh Baruch Hu, and then Hashem returned v'hishrosh kanosa b'neihem, and rested His divine presence amongst them. Then they went back to that level of their ancestors. They became, so to speak, the chariot of the divine presence itself, and they were considered to be redeemed. And he says that's why the Sefer begins with the description of the Avos and ends with the construction of the Mishkan. The essence of what I think the Ramban is trying to convey here about Sefer, the relationship between Sefer Bereshis and Sefer Shemos, is that Sefer Bereshis is the book of Yitzira. It's the foundation. It is the formation. It's the creation in every sense. It is the seeds that lead to Sefer Shemos. Sefer Shemos is the translation of everything we've learned in Sefer Bereshis into action. The Maisa, what transpires in terms of the life that their descendants will lead as well. And that Maisa, that action, although it begins with the Golus in Mitzrayim and the Geula, it certainly doesn't end there, because it only ends once they have been able to construct the Mishkan and somehow retain and go back to the, if you like, the level and the actualization of those seeds and that are planted by their ancestors come into reality once the Mishkan is constructed. This idea of the Avos, of the first family of Klal Yisrael, being the Yitzira Lazaron, the foundation and the creation for their descendants, the formation of everything that transpires afterwards, is a very, very powerful idea. Rashi brings, the very first Rashi in the Parsha says that even though they're listed when they're alive and they're by name, they are listed again in their death after they passed away to show how cherished they are. They're compared to the stars. The stars that come out with a number, brings them in with a number as well. And by name, Hashem takes out the host by number. They're all counted, they're all called by name. In what sense are we to understand this medrash? This medrash that Rashi brings, that the Ovos are compared to the stars, which says this. He says that the whole Ikar Shem Tov Shal Odom, it's in the middle of the Kliyokar, at the beginning of the Parsha, he says like this. He says the main Shem Tov, the good name that a person has, it is not known until after the person passes away. The primary sense of a Shem Tov, what the name of a person represents, is only really becomes known after the person's passing. Because in their lifetime, it's not known whether they will retain and remain as righteous as they were before. And that is why that he talks about when Yosef, it says Yosef was in Mitzrayim, Yosef was in his righteousness from the beginning to the end. That itself was a remarkable thing. Until the last moment, there's no telling whether the person will retain that level of righteousness. He says that's why the righteous are compared to the stars who appear after the sunset. After a person's passing, just like the stars only appear after the sun sets, that's when they're effectively their name is clarified. That Shem Tov that they've achieved during their lifetime. That's what it means when it says the posuk in Daniel, we mentioned this before. Those who bring good to others, those who lead others to do the right thing in life, that person called a matzdik or rabim, ein chet bo yodo. There's no way they can sin, because the beautiful Gemara, he brings a beautiful Gemara in Yuma. He says, how is it possible that someone he or she has influenced in a positive way, a person who is matzdik the rabbim, who leads the others to do the right thing, it's inconceivable that they should be in Gehinnom and their Talmud should be in Gan Eden. It's not possible. It's simply not possible. Matzdiki or rabbim, those who lead the others, those who lead the public to do the right thing, they are like stars la'olam void forever. What the Kliyakar is saying here is as follows. Stars are only visible at night. The real Shem Tov of a tzaddik is only visible after their passing. Perhaps this links very powerfully and beautifully with the Ramban. The seeds, the influence of the Avos, the impact they have only becomes visible in Sefer Shemos, as Sefer Shemos begins to play out. And that is why Sefer Shemos begins with listing their names once more. We know their names, but we don't really know their names. The name of a person, a name, defines the person's essence. It symbolizes who they are. It symbolizes what they represent and the impact that they will have long after they pass away. That is what a name is. And that is why when we think about the name of this Sefer, and we wonder, why is it called Shemos? It could be Sefer HaGeula. There's all sorts of names you would think of about Sefer Shemos. Names? Why names? Because it is the Sefer that defines, that crystallizes the foundation, the names of the Avos. Those names which they set in motion, the beginnings that began, those beginnings in Sefer Bereshis only become clear through the course of this Sefer. Many have either visited Yad Vashem or Lahavdil, the Auschwitz Memorial Museum in Poland. The most powerful place in both settings is the Book of Names, the room full of names. Looking at people, looking through those names is immensely moving. I think it can bring a person to tears almost more than anything else there. Because when you see a person's name, you suddenly realize that what that person represented. The power of a name means it takes numbers, it takes statistics, and it brings it home. The name is the essence of the person. And it could be, perhaps, that is why Sefer Shemos begins with Parsha Shemos, names, and ends with Pekudei. What is Pekudei? Pekudei is, of course, it refers to the listing, the listing, the counting, the cheshbon, everything that takes place, the calculations about the contents of the Mishkan, everything that's needed in order to construct the Mishkan. But obviously, a pekudei means something else as well. A pakid is someone who's appointed over something. A person's tafkid is their task in life. Shemos begins with the names of the Ovos and ends with pekudei. It ends with the establishment, the final arrival at the creation, the construction of the Mishkan, which symbolizes the way their names have actually played out in terms of their tafkid, in terms of what their real purpose was, what their real impact and influence was. And I think that is a way of framing, if you like, the whole of this sefer. I'd like to move on to Perek Beis, Pasuk Yud Daled. There are twice in this parsha, at least twice, the word Yediah is used in a very particular sense. When Moshe Rabbeinu kills the Mitzri, when he kills the Egyptian, and he is subsequently splits up the argument between Dosan and Aviram, Perek Beis Pasuk Yud Daled, he says, Vayomen, he says to him, why Loma Sakerecha, why are you hitting the other one? Vayomen, he says, Misomcha leish sava shavet olenu. Who put you in charge of us? Halahorgeni atoimer. Are you going to take to kill me? Kasher raktes hamitzri, as you killed the Egyptian. Vayirom Moshe vayomar. Ochein noida hadover. He says, Ochein noida hadover. It must be. He was very afraid, and he says, now I know the matter is known about. Simple pshat. The fact that they've made reference to it means my secret is out. But Rashi here brings a medrash. The medrash says, Noida li hadover shoyisi tema olav. Now I understand the thing which I was always very surprised about. Ma chotu Yisrael mikol shivim umos lios nirdim avodas perach. What is it? What is it that the Jewish people did? Why are they worse than anyone else? That they should be subjugated in this way. Avoroya ani. He says, I see, to my shock, to my dismay, shehem ru'uyim lekach, that they are fitting in some way for this, that unfortunately it seems that somehow they deserve it. That's one Rashi. Just keep that in your minds for a second. Rashi says later on, Perek Gimel Pasuk Chof Hei, the second instance of this word, the root is the same. It says, sorry, it's Perek Beis Pasuk Chof Hei. Perek Beis Pasuk Chof Hei. It says the Pesukim before the Bnei Yisrael cry out, Vatal Shavosom, etc., etc. Vayishma Elokim es Nakosom, Vayiskol Elokim es Bris es Aram Yitzchak Yaakov, Vayar Elokim es Bnei Yisrael, Vayeda Elokim. Same word, right? Vayeda, right? Moshe Rabbeinu is Noida Hadova, and Hashem says Vayeda. It says Vayeda Elokim. Hashem saw and he knew. What's the difference between seeing and knowing? Says Rashi. Vayeda Elokim, Hashem knew, Nosan Aleim Leiv, he put his heart upon them, V'lo Helim Einov, and he didn't conceal his eyes, he didn't remove his eyes from them, in a sense that he understood there is the depth of knowledge, so to speak, in their situation, in their position. So what we see from both cases is that the word Yoda, Noida, Vayeda, it refers to something deeper. It's a knowledge of the unseen. There is the seeing, there's the situation that's visible, and then there's the unseen, there's the depth, there's something beneath the surface underneath. What knowledge, the knowing represents, is the complexities within their hearts, within who they were. And we have here, which is why I think it's quite striking to compare them, both sides. We have both the complexities of what was within the hearts of the Bnei Yisrael. We have both sides, both the positive and unfortunately the negative as well. To turn to the first example in with the killing of the Mitzri, when it says Ochein Noida Hadover, so the Ksav Sofer says the following thing. The Ksav Sofer says, he asks, what is going on here? Rashi says that he was astonished. I don't understand how it is possible that they can suffer so much. But surely he knew that they had drifted very far away. We know that they weren't keeping in many ways to the examples set by their ancestors. The way he describes it is they were Rishoyim v'chatoim Hashem v'ozve emunasav ha'avos. They'd fallen very far away through the slavery in Egypt. They left the faith of their fathers, v'hefer v'feir bris mitzvahs, milah, they weren't performing milah, all sorts of things. So what is it now? What's Noda Hadova? So he says that Chazal say, Kol zman she'esh shalom b'Yisrael ein kol u'ma v'lo she'nichol nishlot b'hem. What bothered Moshe Rabbeinu was not so much the fact that they suffered, it was the fact that they suffered in this way. How could they suffer in this way, to be slaves to another nation? It could only be, he said, because of the slavery. It could only be because of it could only be because of the lack of shalom, the lack of peace between them. The fact that one can attack another, that someone can speak negatively about someone else, that you can have this situation in that he says, the idea being that they will speak negatively about a situation. The way it's described is a specific reference to Lashon Hara, the Chet HaDibur, the Kli Yakar makes reference to here. They were shruim b'tzar yosem mikol ha'umos, the idea that they sin through speech in particular. Chet Lashon Hara magdil avonos, he says that increases the sin, the punishment. That was what really bothered Moshe Rabbeinu, and that is why that is the revelation he had here. Interestingly enough, the Kli Yakar comes to the defense of Klal Yisrael remarkably against the Medrash almost. He says, they were redeemed that they did not have the problem of Lashon Hara, and it was only these two. It was these two individuals who were Baalei Lashon Hara, the Dosan and Aviram. So he comes to the defense of Klal Yisrael that they should be accused, so to speak, in this way. But either way, what you see here is unfortunately the negative side of the depth of understanding, complexities within a person, a yediyah, a knowledge. The other side is the positive. When you see later on, the second reference that we have, when Moshe Rabbeinu, when it says in the pasuk just before the dialogue between Hashem and Moshe Rabbeinu, Chain Noda, it says Vayeda Elokim, Hashem knew. So the Sforno says there, Vayeda Elokim, very powerful words. Yoda Nigei Levovom, says the Sforno. He knew, he understood the affliction of their hearts, and that they were davening and they were crying out with their entire hearts. As it says afterwards, I understand, I know the pain that they are in. It's almost as if their very faults, the nigei levovom, nega is a problem, it's a fault. A nega is a problem, it's a disease, it's an illness. The fault of their hearts become the pathway out of slavery. I think that's what the Sforno means. It becomes a route to tefillah b'chol leiv. When it says Vayeda Elokim, Hashem saw the slavery, the affliction. Vayeda Elokim, Hashem sees the pain within their hearts. He sees the complexities and the difficulties within their hearts, almost as if perhaps he's seeing the same thing that Moshe Rabbeinu is seeing. He's seeing the problems within, not just the external problems, the dilemmas that they have, the faults that they have. Yet he also sees in the same way what Hashem sees, which only Hashem can see, is that it's from that very place, that very low point, with all the nigei levovom, all of the faults within them, that their tefillahs could be accepted, that it was the moment for redemption. And this ties to a very, very powerful idea from the Nesivos Shalom. The Nesivos Shalom, Shalom Noach Brzozowski, it's a remarkable thing. There are said to be some 56,000 chaburas worldwide learning the Nesivos Shalom. I discovered that today. It's a remarkable thing. Now, he was a Hasidic Rebbe, the Slonim Rebbe, but his Sforim seem to have transcended any group or any category. They are learned in so many different circles. It's a remarkable, remarkable thing. There are different reasons suggested why that might be. His words are very, very accessible. You can learn the Sefer. It's a very, very accessible. It's very easy to learn. So 1 second. It's very easy to learn. It's in that sense. But the other idea that suggested why the Nesivos Shalom has become so widely appreciated is the idea. By the way, he passed away in the year 2000. He was Rebbe from astronomer Rebbe from 1981 to the year 2000. The other suggestion is that he focuses very much on the growth of the individual, what the tools we need in order to grow in life, something which is incredibly powerful and moving for people in this generation particularly. He shines light in the darkness through his words. And he describes the meaning of the snare. He asks simply, what is the significance of the snare, of the burning bush, of the appearance of the Malach Hashem in the burning bush? What is going on? What is the idea behind this? And he says like this, that and he says the whole point of the reason why this is so important is because why does Hashem need to appear within the snare within the bush, before he even speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu? We know the symbolism, we know the idea that Imo Nochi B'tzara, Hashem is with the Jewish people in their suffering. We understand, we've learned before, but still, that whole essence of that idea must be so central to what Hashem wants to tell Moshe Rabbeinu. He says that you can understand this with the idea that also a very famous idea that they had sunk to the 49th level of Tumah. They were almost without hope. They were almost lost in Mitzrayim, an idea, again, we're very familiar with. But why, he says, why did they have to fall so low? Why was it that Hashem had to wait till the very last moment, this idea that until that last moment, that's when the moment of redemption arrived? Why did that have to be? He says like this, the Omek Ha'inyan, he says, is like a garina zera hanizra ba'adoma. It's like a seed that you plant in the ground. The kodim markif hagarin, he says, what happens is that the seed needs to rot first. All that's left is the tiny potential for life. The seed rots, and there's a tiny potential for life that's left. And then it begins to grow. He says, you can't have a new growth until there is the absence, loss, there is something missing beforehand. As long as the old hasn't rotted away, then the new cannot grow. Omnom, however, he says, if it rots entirely, if that's gone entirely, if the potential for growth has gone as well, then you're finished. There's nothing left. He says the time for new growth is when the seed is placed in at that moment between emptiness and existence, when it is perched on that balance point, that midpoint where it is seconds away from falling into the abyss and seconds away from growth. It's at that moment when the potential for growth is there. He says that was the nature of Klal Yisrael in Mitzrayim. They had sunk to the lowest level in the sense that they reached that point where the old had fallen away and they had the moment now for growth. Now they could be born as a people. That moment arrived at Yetzias Mitzrayim. What the snare represented, what the bush itself represents, he says, is that the bush is not consumed. The bush is burning in fire. There is a burning there. There is a burning of fire in the sense that it's almost the end. And yet, hasneh inenu kol, the bush is not burning. And Moshe Rabbeinu says, what on earth is it? When it says that Moshe turned to look at the snare. Why is the bush not burning? What did he mean? He meant, Moshe Tema, he says, what is it? What is this potential of life that they have? What is this tiny potential of life that they have? Where is the growth going to come from within them? What is the point that they're balanced on that can lead to that future growth and the rebirth as a people? the falling away of the old, and yet from it coming the new, that potential, that moment of growth. And he says that what was that growth? Where did that growth come from? The growth came from the essence of emunah that they had, as Chazal say, because they retained, they kept the faith, that they had nothing else except for that shorish of emunah. They had that root of emunah which exists within every single Jew. There is a spark. We call it the Pintel Yid. There is a spark of emunah, a spark of faith which can never be destroyed. And when everything else is removed, that spark will still remain. And there's always potential to ignite that spark. That's what every Jew can do. And that is the vision of the sneh itself. And this links very, very beautifully to a really striking question at the end of the parsha. When you get towards Moshe Rabbeinu comes to Mitzrayim, Perek Gimel Pasuk Tesvayin, Leich v'asav Toras kol ziknei Yisrael. Yeah, he's told. He says, go to Moshe Rabbeinu is told by Hashem, Leich v'asav Toras ziknei Yisrael. Matzalim, say to them, Hashem ereklei v'seichem nirei. And that's indeed what transpires. If you look at when it actually comes to it. Here at the beginning of Perek Hey, before the end of Perek Daled, it says, "Vayegei Moshe Aaron as kol divrei Hashem asher shlochoi," and Moshe and Aaron go and they gather together as kol ziknei bnei Yisrael, right? And then they tell them all the things. It's Vaya'amein ha'om. Ask Reb Chatzkel Levenstein in his Sefer Or Yechezkel. He asked the following simple question. He says, why did they have to go to the Bnei Yisrael first and only then go to Paro? It would have been so much easier for them to go to Paro first. We know, as the Medrash tells us, the actual fact that they could walk into Paro's palace was remarkable. It was a nace. It was protected in all sorts of ways. And nevertheless, they could stride in there and demand an audience with Paro. What an impact that would have had. Why did they have to go? Why did they have to go first to the Bnei Yisrael? Says Reb Chatzkel Levenstein. It had to be that way around, because only if they would ignite themselves that seed of emunah, that spark of emunah within them, would they be able to be redeemed. The beginning of any growth in Yiddishkeit, in the service of Hashem, in life in general, has to always come from within. Afterwards, that seed will be nurtured. Others will help. It can be developed by wonderful teachers, by people who inspire, all sorts of ways that they can be nurtured. Events in life, after that, the nissim, the wonders, the miracles, everything's there. The markers, it's all going to happen. But the first step has to be Vaya'amein ha'om. The people believed of their own accord without seeing anything. Moshe Rabbeinu walks in to the Bnei Yisrael. He tells them that Hashem has sent him, and it says, and he performs the signs, Vayasa Osus Vayamei Ha'om, and the people believed. That is the idea of Tzchuli Pesach Kechudosh Shel Nachat. If we open an opening for Hashem, like the eye of a needle, then Hashem will open everything else for us after that. But we always have to believe in ourselves first. If we believe that we have the potential to believe ourselves, that we have that spark of emunah is left within us, despite all the challenges we face, from that we are able to grow. That is the spark within. That is the seed that was in them, that was planted within us. We began with the Ovos themselves. They planted that spark within. Ovos who are compared to the stars, they became that kept them alive, kept that emunah alive throughout. The snare, the bush itself burns, and Moshe Rabbeinu realizes that emunah, that spark of emunah, is not dead. The Moshe who says, "Ochein noida hadovar," it's known. I now know why they're in slavery, because there isn't this shalom between them. He almost loses hope in them. Vayeda Elokim, but Hashem knows. Hashem knows that the spark is there. Hashem knows that even with Nigei Levovom, that phrase of the Sfornoi, even the difficulty, the problems within their hearts, from that very moment it will grow. From the Vaya'amein Ha'om themselves, everything else stems from that. Everything else is possible after that. Thank you all very much for joining. I wish you all a good evening and a good Shabbos.
Shkoyach, good Shabbos. Shkoyach.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good Shabbos.
Thank you, Rabbi. Hopefully that spark will set the world on fire. Well, they're doing that in America already.
That's very, very, very kind. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, we won't talk about
Thank you.
America.
Good Shabbos, Rabbi.
Okay. Not now. Have a good Shabbos.
Shabbos.
Okay.